Apple Bloom didn't remember sleeping. She didn't recall ever closing her eyes, but something must have happened, because sometime during the night, the world lost focus, sound lost its voice, and colors blended into a darkening fade. A dull, heavy pulse echoed deep within her consciousness, until, like a crashing wave, it sped up, and Apple Bloom woke to the sound of knocking at her door. She yawned, and her sister's voice called out from the hallway. "Apple Bloom, you up yet? It's past 10. I've been knocking for the last 10 minutes. Mumbling, Apple Bloom shook her head, but quickly remembered her actions from last night. With barely any energy, she rushed towards the door and opened it. Applejack recoiled upon seeing the face of her dreary-looking sister, complete with bags under her eyes. Putting her hooves over the filly's shoulders in concern, Applejack leaned forward and asked, "Sweet mother of Celestia, Apple Bloom, did you get any sleep last night? You look terrible." Apple Bloom nervously looked away. "I couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about yesterday." Sympathy soon replaced Applejack's worried expression, and she leaned forward and hugged her sister. "I know. It's terrible what happened, but don't you worry. We're going to get through this together, along with Mr. Rich. Speaking of which," Applejack pointed to the bathroom across the hall, "y'all should get cleaned up first, before we head on over to Mr. Rich's to give our condolences." Apple Bloom's expression quickly slid into horror. "You mean she's still dead?" Applejack whipped her head towards her sister, looking slightly frightened. "What? Apple Bloom, are you sure you're all right?" Realizing her blunder, Apple Bloom quickly pushed past her sister and entered the bathroom. "I'm fine, just still tired. I'll be out soon." She closed the door and locked it before resting her head against the door. Her sister banged on it a few times, calling out her name. "Don't come in. I'm on the toilet." The knocking stopped, and Apple Bloom heard a faint sigh from the other side. Applejack said, "Listen, Apple Bloom, if you want to talk about anything, you can come to me, okay?" "Yeah," answered Apple Bloom, slowly huddling her rear legs closer to her chest, curling into a ball. "Don't take too long. We leave in an hour," said Applejack before the sound of her hoofsteps receded to silence. When she was sure Applejack was gone, Apple Bloom stopped resisting and let the tears fall down her cheeks. She had failed. A whole night of wishing wasted. Diamond Tiara was still dead, and it was all her fault. "I did this. I killed her." Slowly, Apple Bloom dragged herself into the tub and turned on the shower, ignoring the cold water that began to rain down on her. It was nothing compared to the empty, icy feeling inside. This wasn't what I wanted. I wanted something bad to happen to her, but not like this. I didn't want her killed. Now I have blood on my hooves, thought Apple Bloom, thinking back to her wish for ill fortune on Diamond Tiara. It had come true, but it was the worst kind of fortune a pony could get. Death. Bully or not, Diamond Tiara didn't deserve to die. She may have done many mean things, but this wasn't what Apple Bloom wanted. Apple Bloom gritted her teeth and banged her head against the wall. "It's all your fault. She's dead 'cause you made a wish on a shooting star, and it came true. Why didn't you just wish for your cutie mark, or something else? You made Mr. Rich childless. You made Silver Spoon friendless. How could you?" Eventually, she started to feel lightheaded and stopped. Taking in a deep sigh, Apple Bloom looked up at the ceiling and wished her headache would wake her from this nightmare. After a few more minutes underneath the cold shower, Apple Bloom stepped out and dried herself off before heading downstairs. Somber faces awaited her when she saw the rest of her family. Big Macintosh looked the worst. Being close friends with Filthy Rich, she'd heard that the two didn't get along well at first, with some of the stories not sounding too far off from what she and Diamond Tiara were like. How they suddenly became friends was a mystery. Would the same have happened to me and Diamond Tiara if she... Apple Bloom pushed away such thoughts fearful she'd start crying again otherwise. Once Apple Bloom presented herself, Granny Smith, carrying a basket that smelled of apple pie, turned to the door. "Let's go," she said in a tone that Apple Bloom only ever heard when they were talking about her parents. As the Apple family left the grounds of the farm and made their way into town, Apple Bloom couldn't help but wonder how her other friends were doing. Sweebelle looked like she was in tears last time she saw her, and Scootaloo had still been shocked. What were they feeling at the moment? None of her family members spoke as they passed through town. Apple Bloom noticed the signs of Ponyville mourning its loss. It only caused the nail of guilt to be hammered deeper into her coffin. Her wonderful town had lost all its colour and charm, becoming one big memorial ceremony. Apple Bloom even dared to say it was worse than the time discord was running wild and loose. Sure, things looked grim, and she would never forget the horrible feeling of being discorded, but deep inside, some small part of her had faith that her big sister and her friends would save the day and everything would go back to normal, which it did. This, however, couldn't have a happy ending. Diamond Tiara couldn't come back, and nothing was ever going to be normal again. Before Apple Bloom knew it, she was at the entrance of a rich mansion, home to her former greatest enemy. She winced upon thinking such a thing, especially now that she's gone forever. Big Macintosh knocked on the door, and a Pegasus maid answered, looking relieved when she saw them. "Thank goodness you're here, Big Macintosh. It's Master Rich. He's..." Eyes narrowing, Big Mac growled. "He's drinking again, isn't he?" The maid slowly nodded her head. "Can you blame the stallion?" "No," said Macintosh, sighing in frustration. "But I'll be damned if I let him waste away like he almost did with Crystal Eyes." He turned to his family. "Go on home. I'll take care of this." "You sure?" asked Applejack, placing her hoof on his shoulder. Big Mac nodded. "I'm sure. I figured this would happen." Applejack nodded in understanding as she led Apple Bloom and Granny Smith away from the mansion while Big Mac went inside. Apple Bloom hesitated to say something. She really wanted to go inside and talk to Mr. Rich to comfort him and apologize for the loss of his daughter. She then noticed the basket still in Granny's mouth and got an idea. Nudging her sister, she asked, "Hey sis, we forgot to give Mr. Rich our pie. Can I deliver it to him and go meet my friends afterwards?" Applejack took a look at Granny, who nodded in agreement as she placed the basket on Apple Bloom's back. Applejack smiled and said, "All right, just be home in time for supper, Apple Bloom, and be careful on the streets, okay?" Nodding, Apple Bloom quickly rushed back to the mansion and knocked on the door. She explained to the maid about the pie and how she'd also need to wait for her brother to take her home. Granted, she could have left on her own, but she wanted to stay as long as possible to talk to Mr. Rich. "I have to tell him about the wish and everything. It's the right thing to do." The maid allowed her inside, where she saw, for the first time, the home of Diamond Tiara. She couldn't help but stare at the clean and decorated hall with its silver chandeliers, fancy vases, and portraits of the rich family. It was something she'd never liked to admit, but Apple Bloom had always been envious of how Diamond Tiara had so much wealth and she didn't. It wasn't that she wanted nice things, but the fact of the matter was that farming didn't make as much money as the various businesses Mr. Rich associated with. Even with just a small fraction of the money Tiara's family had, would have made her family's life a lot easier. After placing the pie on a nearby table, the maid guided Apple Bloom into the living room, where she sat on what had to be the comfiest couch ever. The maid excused herself, saying she would bring some tea, which allowed Apple Bloom to take some time to look around more. The living room was filled with enough books to make Twilight jealous, and there was even a small bar filled with drinks, some of which were her family's apple cider. However, the most eye-catching feature in the room was the fireplace mantel across from her, where two pictures sat framed by wreaths and lit candles. She walked closer for a better look, and saw that one of the photos was Diamond Tiara, smiling and looking as happy as can be. The other one was of a mare Apple Bloom had never seen before. yet she looked strangely familiar. Her mane was the same shade of light purple as Tiara's, complete with the telltale white streaks, evenly layered, except it was more smooth and reached past her shoulders. Her coat was also like a much darker magenta, and she had a crystal necklace around her neck. She was absolutely beautiful, like one of those models she saw in magazines such as Fleur de Lis. Apple Bloom tried to figure out why this mare looked so familiar, but for the life of her she couldn't. A voice behind her, nearly spooking her, said, "I see you've met Mistress Rich." The maid had turned with the tea and placed it on the coffee table. "So, she's Diamond Tiara's mother?" asked Apple Bloom, looking at the picture in amazement. "But how come I've never seen her before?" The maid held back a sob and sniffed. Apple Bloom's eyes lit up and looked back at the photos, which she realized was a memorial. "No," Apple Bloom whispered. "You mean she—" The maid's nodding only confirmed Apple Bloom's worst suspicions. "She was like me. All this time. She lost her mother too." Tears began to drip down her cheeks as she closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "I need some time alone. Is there a restroom around here?" The maid nodded and gave her directions, which Apple Bloom immediately followed. She reached the end of the hall and was about to turn the corner when her brother's voice stopped her in her tracks. Rubbing her eyes, Apple Bloom turned her head in the opposite direction and, curious, began to walk towards the door where the sound was coming from. She peeked inside and saw her brother in some kind of office, but what nearly made her gasp was the pony lazily sitting on the seat next to the desk. Mr. Rich had always been one of those types who dressed neat and looked proud, often reminding Apple Bloom of rarity and her obsession with looking good. If it wasn't for the fact that the stallion she was seeing had his cutie mark on his flank, Apple Bloom would have been hesitant to believe it was Filthy Rich. He had the worst bed mane she had ever seen, and his clothes were scattered around the floor, ripped up and torn to shreds. He looked dirty, and it was clear from the smell that the stallion hadn't been bathing. She hesitated to look at his bloodshot and baggy eyes, as he lifted his drink and gulped it down faster than Rainbow Dash did during cider season. Holding her breath, Apple Bloom watched as her brother shook his head at the sight and said, "Rich, I know this is hard for you. Celestia helped me, I know, but look at you." "You think I care about my looks anymore, Mac?" asked Rich as he took a chug from the bottle. Wiping his mouth, his near-dead eyes gazed at the floor. "She's gone. My baby girl. My little diamond. Gone. I have nothing." "That's not true," said Big Mac, stepping forward. "You can't just go out there and say that when you still have—" "What?" snorted Filthy Rich. "Money? Power? My business? My home? All of that I would trade in a heartbeat for my daughter. Even just 5 more minutes with her." He leaned back against his chair and sobbed. "She told me she didn't want to die, Mac. Before they tried to operate on her, she said she didn't want to die. I said she wasn't going to, and that we were going to head back home. And look what happened. Look what happened!" Apple Bloom winced as Rich got up from his seat, screamed, and threw his bottle against the wall. "She was all I had left. After Crystal and the baby died, I should have loved her even more, but I failed. I drove a wedge between me and my daughter. Don't deny it, Mac. I was a terrible father." "That ain't so, Rich," said Macintosh, trying to place his hoof on Filthy's shoulder, but it was shrugged off. "You loved your little girl. All of us could see that. You were still adjusting." 3 years, Mac," mumbled Rich, somehow finding another unopened bottle of liquor among the mess and pulling the cork loose. "I pushed her away. We were all we had, and I pushed her away because she reminded me too much. Too much. Work. That was my balm. That was how I justified it. Always so much work to do. I couldn't spend time with her. And look what she became. You think I don't know?" He took a long swig from his bottle and gasped when he finished. "And now, this is punishment. I know, it has to be. I couldn't raise her right. So whatever higher power exists took her, my precious diamond. I failed. Applebloom had never seen a grown-up cry so much, and the sight of Filthy Rich bawling and calling out his daughter's name as he rocked back and forth brought her to tears too. She wondered if this was how Granny Smith felt when she lost her son. Was this how any parent felt when they lost their child? She never once thought that Diamond Tiara was loved by any pony, but despite all the nasty things she had done, she had to have been loved. Her father, Silver Spoon, there had to be other ponies out there who loved Diamond Tiara. Was I so blind to hate in her that I forgot she was a pony just like me? With family, friends, just like me, thought Applebloom. Macintosh shook his head. But is drinking yourself to death going to be the answer, Rich? I know this is hard, but you can't let yourself waste away like you did after Crystal's death. I know. No! Shouted Rich, rising up and getting into Big Mac's face. You know nothing about what I'm going through, you dumb hillbilly. Macintosh groaned. Really, Rich? Name-calling? Buck you. You have everything. You still got a family and purpose. My family was my purpose. And they're all dead. I might as well be dead too. At least I wouldn't have to suffer like this, shouted Rich, saliva splashing all over Mac's calm face. This only seemed to make Rich even more angry. And you know jack squat. What makes you think you know anything about me? And stop with that stoic look of yours. I bucking hate it. Applebloom gasped as Filthy Rich struck her brother in the face with his hoof. To his credit, Mac didn't even flinch when he was hit. Slowly, he turned his head back to Rich and proceeded to hit him with his own hoof. The two soon grabbed each other and started wrestling all over the office, making an even larger mess than before. Every second, there seemed to be something new either broken or knocked down from the tumble. After minutes of fighting, Big Mac managed to pin Rich, who still struggled to escape. Let me go, you stupid farmer! Let me go! Shouted Rich, screaming some more until his shouts became whimpers. He opened his eyes as Mac looked at him with pity before slowly getting up. The two friends looked at each other before embracing, Macintosh letting a sobbing Rich rest on his chest. Mac, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It's all right, Rich, muttered Macintosh, closing his eyes as a tear dripped down his cheek. When my parents died, I remember blaming myself just as much as y'all are right now. I didn't talk to any pony. I was just so angry all the time. I blamed myself for not being strong enough to help Pa or quick enough to help Ma. It really was a shocker. I was now the stallion of the house all of a sudden because of a terrible tragedy. The only thing we had to smile about was Applebloom being born. Big brother, whispered Applebloom. Out of all her family, her brother had always been the least reluctant to talk about their parents. Do you remember our days growing up? Asked Big Mac with a small smile. For the first time since she walked in, Applebloom heard a Rich chuckle. Hard to forget. We were so stupid back... well, mostly me. I thought you were a poor farmer with filthy habits, and a freak because of your size and silent ways. I lost count how many times we fought. Yeah, and I couldn't wait to graduate so I could be rid of you, chuckled Mac. Of course nothing changed, even as adults. But do you remember what you said to me 2 months after I lost my folks? I believe it may have been, "Stop being all depressed and such, you're spreading it around," Rich quoted. He paused, as if remembering, and then a small smile slipped free, along with another soft chuckle. And then you proceeded to slug me a good one. Crystal and your granny gave us such a scolding that day, calling us foals at our age. How long was that fight? About an hour. After that, y'all were hugging me while I was bawling my eyes out. The two old friends looked at each other and hugged again. Applebloom didn't know if she should feel confused or relieved. She even wondered if what happened to her brother and Mr. Rich could have happened to her and Tiara. Could they have eventually grown out of their hate and just become friends? Big Mac and Filthy Rich sounded like they hated each other back then, just like her and Tiara. But it all changed Now I'll never know, because of what I've done. What do I do, Mac? Asked Rich, sighing, and looked above his fireplace. Above it was a family portrait of his entire family. My wife is gone. My children are gone. What am I supposed to do? Rich, said Mac, putting his hoof on his best friend's shoulder. I can't give you an answer because, honestly, I don't know what I would do if I lost my sisters and Granny Smith. But I can tell you this. They wouldn't want me to waste myself in such a way as you're doing. They'd kick my butt from the grave if it ever happened. Crystal and Diamond Tiara wouldn't want to see the stallion they both love fall to pieces. It ain't gonna be easy, but I'll be there to help you, all the way. Filthy Rich nodded. Thank you, Big Macintosh. Apple Bloom turned away from the scene and ran. She saw some stairs and ran up them, not stopping until she reached the top. Sitting down on the top step, she buried her head into her hooves and cried. What have I done? I'm so sorry, Mr. Rich. I'm so sorry. Diamond Tiara, I'm so sorry. I never wanted you to die. Never before in her life had Apple Bloom felt more alone in the world than she did now. Her one wish, her hatred, had ruined the lives of so many. Every pony was crying, and a filly was dead. All because of her. As Apple Bloom continued to sob, she noticed out of the corner of her eye a door with a familiar silver tiara cutie mark engraved into the wood. Diamond Tiara's room, thought Apple Bloom as she slowly opened it. It was like a room fit for a princess, complete with velvet walls and a bed that looked similar to Rarity's, only smaller and more pink. There were tons of stuffed animals all over the place, each of them cuter than the next. Apple Bloom guessed she could fit 2 of her bedrooms into the available space, with room to spare. Apple Bloom nervously entered the room that used to belong to her bully. Turning to the nearest wall, she saw dozens of pictures from Diamond Tiara's life. Some of them with her as a foal, others looked so recent they couldn't have been more than a few months ago. She could see Silver Spoon, Tiara's family, and even members of the staff with her occasionally. Then she saw something that made her stop in her tracks. Granny Smith had never missed an opportunity to show how cute Apple Bloom was when she was a foal. That same foal with her mother's red bow was right there in diapers, sleeping next to another foal she assumed was Tiara. She quickly remembered Applejack telling her how she used to be crib pals with Tiara. Of course she didn't believe a word of it then, and yet the proof was as clear as day. She wondered what Apple Bloom thought as she passed this photo every day. Did she remember a time when we were friends? 'Cause I sure as hey can't. Stepping away from the wall, Apple Bloom turned around and saw a desk that was completely bare, except for a small leather book, and a few pencils lying around it. Curious, she walked towards it and looked at the book, spotting a bookmark in between the pages. Opening the book, she started from where the bookmark left off. Dear Diary, I'm so excited, I can barely keep it in me from crying out in joy. Daddy says he can stay home for the holidays this year. In fact, he even wants to host a party at our house next week. Silver Spoon and a bunch of other important ponies will be coming over. But Daddy says he's even inviting the Apples if they want to come. Ugh, I don't understand why they need to come over. But if having Apple Bloom and her loser family at my house is what I'll have to deal with to have Daddy for housewarming day, then I'll live with it. I just hope he doesn't want us taking pictures together. Can you imagine that? So lame. Besides, Silver Spoon will be coming over, so I won't be alone. And maybe we can even have a sleepover. Actually, maybe I'll hold on to that. I want to spend as much time with Daddy as possible this year. I've already picked out Daddy's present. I'm going to make him a bracelet with our cutie marks together. Normally I would just go buy something, but this is the first time we're going to be together for the holidays since Mummy and Golden Pockets died. I wish all of us could be together, but Mummy and my little brother are both in Elysium. Do they celebrate the holidays in Elysium? Does Santa Hooves go there too? Sebastian says that they're watching me and Daddy from above. Well, I hope they'll do so when we open presents and such. Maybe it will feel like we're a family again. Anyway, I've got to go to bed. Silver Spoon and I are going to go ice skating tomorrow because of the upcoming snow day. I can't wait for Hearthwarming Day. Diamond Tiara. Apple Bloom slowly held the book in her hooves as she stared at the page without making a sound. As delicately as she could, she read the entry again, and again. She looked at the next page, only to find it blank. Forevermore it would be. She turned to the previous pages, quickly scanning them and finding quite a few entries with her name on it. She wondered how far back it went, and what Diamond Tiara really behaved like. The answers were all here. A part of her told her to put it back. It wasn't hers to take, especially since the owner died. But part of her wanted to know more about Diamond Tiara and her past, about why she was a bully and why she hated Apple Bloom. In the end, her curiosity got the better of her. Apple Bloom quickly ran out, making sure to close the door, and snuck back to the living room. The maid was already gone, which made the next part easier. The basket was right there, where she left it. Empty now, save for the blanket that had kept the pie warm. Apple Bloom quickly hid the diary underneath the apple-scented fabric. Just as she put it away, her brother came in from the hall. "Apple Bloom, what are you doing here?" asked Big Mac. "I came back to give Mr. Rich the pie and wait for you," replied Apple Bloom hastily. Big Mac raised an eyebrow, but before he could say anything, Filthy Rich came in and asked, "Everything all right, Mac?" "Yeah, we were just leaving," said Mac. The apples bid Filthy Rich farewell, but before they left, he quickly said, "Wait, Apple Bloom." Apple Bloom stopped and looked at him. Nervously, Rich pawed the ground. "My daughter, I know she did some really bad things to you and your friends. Do you hate her for it?" The earnest intensity in Filthy Rich's voice surprised Apple Bloom almost as much as the question itself. Did she hate Diamond Tiara now, even after her death? I don't know, Mr. Rich. Your daughter did a lot of mean things." She winced upon seeing his frown increase. "But there had to have been some good in her, right? Maybe I never saw it, but she had to still be a good pony in some way." Filthy Rich only nodded before retreating back to the hole. One of the butlers guarded them out, as Apple Bloom wondered, "Do I really still hate her?"